Hello, I'm Laura Tyson.
And I'm Robert Reich.
And we're very appreciative of your time and energy to listen to us talk about our textbook project, our Econ 1 textbook project, which we're very excited about.
And we're excited about because when Wiley approached us, Wiley wanted something that was as good as current textbooks, but also reflected what's going on in the world, the global economy, technology, public policy, behavioral economics. And this is the time to produce that kind of new textbook.
I agree completely. It's interesting. I've been an economist all my life, and it's been really fascinating to see all the changes going on, particularly the way the world economy works because of globalization, the way transactions are done because of technological change, the shift in the composition of the economy towards high technology industries and away from traditional labor-intensive industries. Fascinating to watch my profession talk about the increasing insights from psychology in terms of how people actually behave. So a wedding of economics and psychology.
And behavioral psychology has also had a big effect on how public policy is formulated. And part of this book that excites me, because I've been doing economic policy or teaching economic policy for 30 years, is an understanding that, in fact, economics and public policy are so closely integrated. You can't get away from institutions. I mean, an economy is as good as the institutions that comprise that economy, both public institutions and private institutions.
That's the institutions aspect is also very interesting to me. I started my own career in economics in what used to be called comparative economics and development. And at the time, that was where the focus was on institutions and how economies that, say, organized around non-market institutions behaved compared to economies that worked around market institutions. If you fast forward to today, institutional economics has become more and more important among all economists. And the notion that market economies perform differently depending upon the quality of their institutions, depending upon the quality of their courts or their law or their anti-corruption activities, and also on their values. So it's not just the institutions, but the social mores and values.
And, our textbook is going to reflect what's in a basic textbook today, but we are going to add all of this. We're going to suffuse the text with the kind of perspectives that enable students to really understand economics in the real world. We are interested in, as I'm sure you are interested, Laura is interested, in making sure that students are effective citizens in the world, that they understand economics in context, that they can use economics effectively in their daily lives.
So globalization has to be center to the chapters, whether you're talking about supply and demand for a basic commodity like gasoline, or you're talking about what's happening to the price of food, or you're talking about what's happening to the price of the clothing you're wearing.
Or even Fed policy, getting back to public policy. There's no way that the Federal Reserve Board can set interest rates without at least one eye on the rest of the world economy and global investors and what they are going to do in response to whether the Fed raises or lowers interest rates. Right now, as you know, the Fed is in a quandary because the Fed wants to lower interest rates to stimulate the economy, but dare not do too much for fear that global investors will not come to the United States, and that will push the dollar down and fuel inflation. So how can students understand any of this if they don't understand globalization? The same is true of behavioral economics, of technology, of public policies generally.